You are listening to Missed Apex Formula E. We are charged up and ready to go. Welcome back to the Missed Apex Formula E podcast. I'm your host, Chris Stevens. We are in the middle of a super busy period right now for Formula E. We have got the next 5 races coming up every 2 weeks. It is a good time to be a Formula E fan right now, but we found just enough time to have another chat with a driver, and it is not just any driver, it is the reigning world champion, Jake Dennis. Jake, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me on. It's a pleasure to be on and obviously chatting to you guys and giving you a bit of an insight, obviously, what's been going on inside the Formula E paddock.
Yeah, so we've just come out of this big break between races, and now they're coming up very thick and fast. So how has the preparation for all these races been going so far?
Yeah, it's been pretty busy with losing Hyperdad. I think obviously most of the drivers were relatively, pleased because it meant we had sort of 7 weeks off. But it's amazing how much of your schedule gets compacted with simulator days or meetings here and there, some test days if you're racing other categories. So it's been pretty full on. I managed to get about a week off. Went skiing, which was nice. But ultimately, it's been a pretty busy schedule. A lot of preparation obviously has gone into the upcoming races. It's not like every emphasis was on just one race. It would have been a waste of 7 weeks doing that. So it's been busy. We've all been working hard. I'm sure every team in the paddock has, and I think everyone's just eager to get going now. It's like you said, it feels a long time since Saudi, and we're all raring to go.
Tell me about the season so far. It's been a bit of a mixed bag. You had an incredible win in Diriyah, but a couple of difficult races. If we go all the way back to Mexico City, for example, first of all, just tell me what it's like walking into the paddock as the reigning world champion. Do you feel that target on your back, or do you get to puff your chest out a little bit more? What's that like?
Yeah, I think you do get to puff your chest out a bit more. You do have something about you. Honestly, I feel like if you're good in Formula E, you've always got a target on your back, and we've been pretty strong since we arrived in Formula E. So I don't see me just because I have the number one on my car, everyone's out to beat me. Like it's. I've been a competitor inside of Formula E and winning races from the start. So it's always like, Mitch has got a target on his back. Nick has, Dak, Pascal. All the top guys. You always want to beat them. So from that aspect, it's very much the same. But just being champion, walking into the paddock, especially in Mexico, was pretty special. You are only world champion for the first time once, and to step into the racetrack was a good feeling. And but yes, that novelty wears off pretty quickly, and I now just feel like I want to win it again, and everything feels very much how it did last year.
And that win in Diriyah, I mean, it was very reminiscent of your wins last year, where Porsche just came out the blocks, and they're not only the works team, but obviously you guys as their customer team as well. You guys just fired out the blocks so quickly, and it almost looked like we were back in 2023 again.
I mean, I wish it was the case. Nick's had a really strong start of the season and been super consistent. But yeah, I mean, there's no denying we've had a really good package so far this year. Pascal winning the first race, me winning the second, but you get hit with reality on day 2 in Saudi, and you're in the mid to rear end of the pack, and it just shows how difficult it is to be consistent in Formula E, and anything can change overnight. So yeah, there's no denying the Jaguars are extremely fast, we're fast, and I honestly think the Nissan and McLarens have taken a big step forward since last year and definitely look like the next contenders. Jev's been racing really well so far as well, but that Nissan and McLaren look extremely competitive.
They do seem to be like the dark horses at the moment. And I do wonder, in a championship that has a 2-year homologation cycle on the powertrains, and obviously the powertrain is the biggest differential between the cars because the chassis themselves are all spec, how do you go about, finding that kind of performance between seasons or between races?
It's challenging, like you said, everything's spec'd right now, so it's really difficult to make that big step. For us, obviously being one of the more competitive powertrains, you're looking for much smaller steps. The people like Mahindra, Neo, or ERT, they're called now, I think those guys are wishing the homologation would just open up immediately so they can make their changes. But yeah, it's just software. The software inside of Formula E is so technical and advanced nowadays. You're always evolving with it. You're always making changes. Every time you step in the car, it's always different software, and it doesn't always work, I can assure you. But most of the time, it does go in the right direction, even if you feel like it doesn't. But yeah, you just trust the numbers. You trust the team. I trust Porsche, who are ultimately designing the software to give us the best package possible.
How much of a collaboration is it between, the Andretti team and with Porsche? Because obviously they can help you be extremely competitive, but then you can also be a massive thorn in their side. I'm sure they don't love the fact that their customer team won the Drivers' Championship last year. So, yeah, how do you go about managing that? And is that a typical relationship? Do Jaguar and Envision work the same way, do you think?
From my understanding, Jaguar and Envision have the same sort of philosophy. They're very much open to each other and trying to help each other. But I'd be lying to you right now if, we were saying that we don't want to beat Porsche. We want to beat everyone on the grid. But ultimately, I think the biggest thing is there's been a real big improvement from last year. Last year it did get quite difficult at times between the two teams, and we didn't have the best relationship. I think through the winter we've really worked on that and have complete harmony between the two teams right now, and we generally just want to beat Jaguar and obviously Envision and everyone on the grid, but ultimately they are our main rivals. So far it's been working really well. We've been sharing data on every aspect, and all four drivers are pushing in the same direction, which is important as well. We all know where we need to improve. Ultimately, it will be quite difficult until the regulations open in our weakest area, because it's more hardware more than software. So right now it's just very much tuning everything and making sure we're all running in sync.
So it's almost like you guys have to work together to stop a bigger threat coming in, basically, i.e. the four Jaguar drivers.
Yeah, just having four drivers instead of two and four data lots instead of two just makes so much better, especially when we are running the same software, but you've got four different driving styles, and ultimately we all start off the same and then veer off as the weekend goes on. And Pascal's running this on software, I'm running slightly different, just due to the nature of my driving style. So they can build up a more database of not just a one driving style technique. And I think it's quite clear that Antonio's obviously been struggling a little bit since Gen 3, and he hasn't quite been in sync with the software as much as say me and Pascal have. And that's just driving style and driving technique. We all know he can drive incredibly well, and he's a champion for a reason. So it's just a matter of time for him to try and tune the software to his liking as well. And I'm sure it will click at some point, and we'll see the usual Antonio come through.
So how easy is it to adapt your driving style to the software? Because we hear about in Formula E, you almost need to think on your feet quite a bit because the track is changing conditions and the car handles differently in different stages in the race. So how easy would it be for you to change your driving style to adapt to the software?
It's never easy. You're always trying to adapt the software to your driving style, and that's a sign of a good software. Like if the software can do that, then it's a sign of a good one. But it does have its limitations. There's only so much the software can do, and there is definitely times where you need to make a compromise. But right now we seem to be in a pretty good window and working well with it.
So with that software, is it more important than car setup, for example, or is it just sort of one and the same?
Honestly, I'd probably say it's more important than the setup. I think once the team has a very good baseline, it's like I haven't really changed my baseline setup since Portland last year. It's generally stayed the same the whole time. And but the software is always evolving, and so you need a good engineer to give you a good baseline setup, and then you need a good engineer who can understand Formula E racing, because it's very different to anything else. And my engineer is very good at that, and that's sort of one of the biggest reasons why I brought him into Formula E. I worked with him in the past in Aston Martin, and then when BMW left, I brought him in because I knew he would be good at the racing situation, and he's obviously a very good engineer as well. But I honestly think once the baseline setup is pretty well dialed in, it's really down to that software making you have the next step. But you need a good engineer to get you out of the, get you out of the shit. You could say, like, if your car balance is just way off, like, you need someone who can turn it around overnight, and he can do that. And honestly, all the engineers here in Formula E are very, very good. So, it's probably it is the next best thing to Formula One. So you've got some really intelligent people inside of this paddock.
And with just going back to the driving style, I almost wonder, because we spoke to Lucas di Grassi a couple of weeks ago, and he described the Formula E car as almost like a GT driving style. So first of all, would you agree with that? And second of all, does your experience in GTs help you in that sense, do you think?
I honestly don't agree with that at all. I'm not going to lie.
Okay.
I obviously still drive GTs now. I drive BMW in the GT3. And I mean, a GT is like you basically just have to smash the brake pedal and then you're into the ABS, and then you get around a corner and you deal with the weight transfer that way. Whereas in Formula E, you can't hit the brake pedal as hard as you want. There's very little grip inside of Formula E. So if you hit the brake pedal like you do in a GT car, you'll just lock all four tires and immediately crash. So it's a lot more finesse inside of Formula E, and you generally have to play around with your left foot a lot more and really like modulate somewhat you're feeling underneath you. Ultimately in qualifying, you've got four wheels, you've got a steering wheel, and you try and drive the thing as fast as possible, but and that's what you do in a GT car or any sort of single-seater car. But the way you brake inside of a Formula E car is very, very different to anything I've ever driven, and I honestly don't think there'll ever be anything like it, due to the regeneration, the way that the battery works, the way the brakes work. It's so unique, and you just don't get taught that in your junior career. In junior career, it's very much smash the brake pedal and then try and get off as quick as possible to carry the minimum speed. Whereas in Formula E, it's a bit more of like a road car approach, times 10, I would say. Like the way you bleed onto the brake pedal, you don't have these big brake attacks or anything like you do in Formula One or anything like that. So very different, very unique, and it took me a long time to learn that when I moved into Formula E. There's no denying I struggled in my first sort of 4 races inside of Formula E. I just lacked pace, I lacked performance, and then it obviously clicked for me, and I managed to get on top of it. But I don't know, maybe the Mahindra's a bit different, and you need a GT star.
Maybe. I mean, I wouldn't say you struggled in that phase. I mean, Formula E has been notoriously difficult for rookies, and you did end up fighting for the title in your rookie year. So I'd say you got on top of it pretty quickly.
Eventually.
Tell me about Tell me about that first test where you experienced the Formula E. Obviously, this was Gen 2.
Yeah.
What was that first test like?
I mean, there's a lot of pressure because I was basically fighting for a drive against 6 other BMW DTM drivers.
Okay.
I was coming in as an Aston Martin GT driver, and basically I had one seat left alongside Max Gunther. And politically, it didn't make sense to put me in the car because DTM was finishing, and they obviously got 6 DTM BMW drivers they need to put in the race car, and they were all fighting for that Formula E seat. So it was me on a shootout with Max Gunther as the baseline. But the day itself was obviously a success. There's no denying that. But the way the feeling was the biggest thing. Was I couldn't believe how smooth the Formula E car is to drive. There's 0 vibrations, 0 noise. All you hear is wind. So that's very very different. I thought I forgot my earplugs or something like this because you're used to hearing a gearbox, an engine, everything's rattling around you, it vibrates a lot. Getting into a Formula E car, it's driving on a super smooth road car with the smoothest road surface there is, and with your window down, basically that wind effect. So but it was cool, it was so unique, so different, and it's nice to see the rookies step into a Formula E car now, and you see their face when they jump out, and they're like, "Wow, that is so not what I expected." But they get round it pretty quickly. The juniors nowadays, these young kids, these 18, 19-year-olds, they're obviously pretty good, and but it's just them coming from F3, F2 is so different to that.
So is that how it came about? You just got a call up from BMW saying, we're doing shootouts for our Formula E seat come down?
A little bit more complex, but basically I had a good contact inside of BMW Formula E, who was the energy management guy inside of Formula E, and he said there's an opening coming up in Formula E, just for a heads up. So then I contacted a guy called Mike Crack, who was like the head of that department at that stage, and was basically going to decide who goes in the car. And I went for a simulator.
TP now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I went for a simulator test, and I'm pretty good on simulators, to be fair. Like, I've been doing it for years with Red Bull and all this. So I sort of passed the simulator test. And then it was like, okay, now we're going to put you in the race car and see what you can do. And this was literally like 3 weeks before the Valencia pre-season testing. So it was all like very last minute. At that point, I'd done a year of COVID where I literally didn't even drive a race car because my team didn't race during COVID. So it was pretty tough for me. I really wanted, obviously, the gig. And just a good contact, and obviously performed on the day, and it went from there. And thankfully, I didn't make Mike Crack look like an idiot. No, he looked like a hero putting me in at the end of the day. But at the start of the year, I was like, "Wow, this is tough for both of us, mate."
Yeah. So you say something clicked in the middle of that rookie season, and you did fight for the title. Obviously, it didn't quite come off in the end. What do you think is the biggest difference between the Jake Dennis at the end of that rookie season compared to the Jake Dennis that just won the Formula E title?
I think the maturity. The way I go about a whole weekend now is I'm very much just dialed into what I need to go faster. Like, back then, and even in my junior career, I was so focused on like outside influences. All I cared about was what position I was in, and just didn't really look at the global picture of what I ultimately needed to go faster, and how quickly I can now move on from bad days instead of like dwelling on them. And if I have a bad session or something like this, I'd be not very negative, but I'd be negative and just wouldn't be positive about any situation, even if there was positives. And I think now, in my older age, it comes with experience and performance. I trust myself a lot more, and the team know if I'm driving around in P15, it's because the car's not good enough. And that's the same like Saudi race too. Me and Norman qualified last. I was 15th, and they know I haven't just forgotten how to drive. Whereas, say if that was season one, I would have been sort of looking over my shoulder a little bit and would have been a little bit worried about if it was me or not. Whereas now I just don't have that.
The consistency from last season was what really made the difference. So were you able to achieve that consistency because you were taking a different attitude into things and thinking, well, maybe second place isn't so bad?
Yeah, 100%. I think it all just snowballs into one. It's like anything. If you're having good performance all the time, your confidence just grows more and more, and it doesn't just need to be motorsport for that to happen. It can be darts, snooker, football, whatever. And you just ride that wave I was on, which was a very good wave to be on. And we just had high performances. But whereas, say, the first year where I almost won it, it wasn't the most consistent year for anyone. We were all struggling with consistency that year. It was a really tough year for everyone. But last year it was just so consistent, and this year that's just sort of where we need to get back to. We have only done a few races, so it's nothing to really worry about too much. But it's an area what we want to keep on working on.
That sounds great, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how that progresses throughout this year. In fact, because it seems like we have an actual, not determined order, but we have people we think are going to win, people we think are going to do quite well, and then people think, if these guys do well, it will be a surprise. So be interesting to see how that plays out. But I'd like to switch attention to some struggles on the track to some struggles off the track. I'm sure you suspected this was going to be coming up. Now, a lot of our listeners are new to Formula E, so they might not know about the Jake Struggles account, which details many of your traveling difficulties or just life or general trying to be an adult difficulties, which is great because I think it humanizes people's heroes, and also makes me feel better about not
Any
doing
delays or any
adulting
mess-ups.
correctly as well. So, I mean, my personal favorite is the dishwasher in Dubai.
That was a good one. That was a good one.
You nearly flooded the flat.
That would have cost a lot.
Yeah. So, I mean, do you have a particular favorite or just one you laugh at every time you see?
I mean, that dishwasher one is pretty funny. I do enjoy that one. I mean, I never really like that one is funny, but like all these delays I have, I'm never laughing because I'm always also on the worst end of it. Yeah. I had a really tough one, which I didn't even post on my Instagram. I didn't keep anyone in the loop on it, but I had a real tough one the other day. I was flying back from Paul Ricard, and I was actually flying private jet. The driver, which I was with as well, is quite wealthy and was like he said, "Come fly with me." So, but we were flying to Leeds, and my car was in Leeds, so I was like, okay. And then the weather was that bad. We had to land into Liverpool, which was about a 2-hour drive from Leeds, and then I had a 3.5-hour drive from Leeds back to my place, which is quite down south. So that was a lovely 6-hour drive, 5.5-hour drive. Like 4 a.m. I got in at something like that, so that was pretty rough. And losing luggage, like that's always a classic for me. But yeah, it's just never ending. But I would say hopefully we come out of it, but then the content will become pretty dull. But it would be nice to just have less delays more than anything.
I was going to ask you if there's a Jake struggle that we don't know about. That is a safe for work story, but you have just told me one, so that's fine. And I can relate the whole traveling thing because I've been traveling a lot more for work lately, and I've become the king of occupying time while you're sat on the runway doing absolutely nothing, waiting for Gatwick's air traffic control to find you a window while they've got 5 flights taking off at the same time, and you wonder who on earth put this schedule together. It makes no sense whatsoever. So if you have any tips for
there is none
occupying that kind of time, no, well there you go.
Well, and YouTube Premium is the best thing I've ever invested into the past year and a half. I'm obsessed with YouTube, and now I don't have to watch any ads or any delays. I can download videos, so that's literally saved me over the past year.
See, I'm a sort of Amazon Prime, Disney Plus download TV
nice
guy, which is always a good one. Now we are predominantly a Formula One show with this Formula E arm, so I've got to ask you about your role with Red Bull, of course. One thing in particular that I'd like to know about is you're probably one of very few drivers.
Why is Max so good?
Well, that will come later. Don't get me wrong, but first, you're one of very few drivers who have driven the current generation ground effect cars and the previous the pre-ground effect cars. So what's the biggest differences between them that you can feel behind the wheel?
Well, it's a good question, actually. It's something I'm not actually really thought about. There was quite a big gap between the two of them, and I drove a lot of cars in between those 5 years, so it is difficult to really give you an explanation. But I think the biggest thing is the power and acceleration you have nowadays is like nothing and come close to it. Even after that full day I did in Abu Dhabi where I did 130 laps or whatever, I was still blown away every time I accelerated by how quick the thing was on not so much 0 to 60 because Formula E is honestly just as good in that department, but it's really from like 100 kph to 200. It's ridiculous how much power that thing has. And thankfully the car I drove in 2017 or something like that was one of the best cars you could ever drive in Formula One because it had so much downforce and probably even slightly more than what they have now, but obviously just didn't have the top speed or power. So the actual cornering speeds weren't too dissimilar to what I drove between the two, so it all felt very similar. But just the braking performance and the power has came on so much over the years, and just the cars are unbelievable to drive. You literally can't get your head around it in a day, and especially coming from Formula E, which is the complete opposite in terms of like speed, in terms of cornering is on very much the other end of the scale. We have good straight line speed, we have good top speed, but it's the cornering where we lack the most, and that is where Formula One excels, especially in a Red Bull.
Yeah. Can Can you feel the difference, I guess, in the low speed versus the high speed? Because these ground effect cars are more reliant on the airflow now. So is
they're just so heavy nowadays. Like when I jump in it, and I even comparing to Formula E, it doesn't feel that nice and slow speed compared to Formula E. Formula E is very nimble and agile, whereas the F1 car is very heavy. It's even heavier to what the two generations I drove. The lighter car was obviously a lot better in the slow speed stuff. It had that massive rake. It had 20 inches of rake it used to have, or something crazy, and the rotation was very strong. Whereas now they're a little bit more lazy. They still rotate pretty well. They get around the corner quite quickly, but it's the 26. I can't remember what year it was. 2016, 2017, I think.
It was definitely one of the big super high downforce when they pushed for the high downforce.
I think
rather
it was
than
18. Yeah, I think it was 2018 which I drove. Yeah, it would have been, because it was 5 years and I drove Trevi Vans 3. So, 2018 was the car I drove. And, it was just, a bit more agile and a bit more nimble in the slow speed stuff.
But just further into your role with Red Bull, is a development driver?
Sim and development driver, Sim and development driver.
Okay, so is your job just, we're going to try this new part on the sim, tell us what it feels like. Is that what?
Yeah, basically, as such, I enter Red Bull and there's two different roles. So basically I have like a development role, which is trying to make the simulator as good as possible to real life. And that will often spend many days where there's no performance going on to the car. It's just driving the same car over and over, and you try and make it as close to real life as possible in terms of feeling and motion and platform. And then there's also the other side of, say Adrian Newey came up with a new grand design, and this is going to go on the car. Now tell us what it does. They obviously gather all the numbers which the simulator deploys to them, which they can rely on incredibly closely. But then they also just want the driver's feedback. Like, what does that actually feel like for the driver? And that's super important to them. And they try and obviously get Max's feedback on that as well, and Checo's, but they're limited on days of just due to being so busy. So it's like a trust between the two, between me and Red Bull. They will rely on me a lot. And then there's also like the race support side, where it's I'm running Thursday, Friday alongside them on the Friday, and making sure that we just try and figure out the best setup possible. The engineers are at the track in Jeddah. They come up with an idea overnight. They want to try and test, and then they'll send it back to us, and I'll basically put it on the simulator and see what my personal feeling is of it, what it does, what they're looking for, and whether they take it onto track in real life.
So now I've got to come to the obvious question that you brought up right at the beginning of this segment. What do you think makes Max Verstappen so dang good at his job?
I actually wish I knew, to be honest. He's just so talented, the kid. I think people are always looking for an answer to be like, oh, he's really good on the brakes and he gains 1/10 in every corner on the brakes. But it's just not. He's just, the feeling he has underneath the car is something which I've never seen before. When I jumped into the Red Bull, it felt very natural to drive and very, very normal. I drove Max's car in FP1, I drove Checo's car on Tuesday, and they felt absolutely identical. And it's just the feeling and precision he has, and obviously the confidence is just like I've never experienced before. And I think he just has absolute trust in everyone around him. The team is very much at one with him as well, and it all just clicks. But he's very dedicated as well. I think that's what people can often see short passed on is, he's in the sim a lot more than Checo, and puts in a lot of effort. Even after when he won the championship highlight round 3 last year, whenever he won it, it was something super early. He was still coming in the simulator and working extremely hard and putting in the hours, when he'd already become champion.
Well, Jake, it's been an absolute pleasure having this chat with you. So I know we've only got a few minutes left with you, so we're going to do some quick fire questions just to round off this interview. So firstly, what is the best and the worst car you've ever driven?
best car I've ever driven was definitely the RB20, Formula Car Red Bull. That was absolutely incredible. The worst car I've ever driven. That's a tough one. I've got to be careful there.
But I almost wonder you thinking back to maybe your junior single-seater days for this one.
Yeah, maybe the new Formula Renault which came out at the time. So there was the old one, and then in my second year of Formula Renault, they brought out a new car, and
It wasn't that great. It was too heavy, not on the downforce, and felt pretty awful. So the Renault 2 litre, it wasn't great.
Okay. Have you ever been scared inside a racing car?
I would say yeah. I think the only time it's happened a few times is when you're driving
In a GT car, and it's in the middle of the night at 3 a.m. at Spa, French of the Spa 24 hour,
and it is torrential rain,
and you cannot see 4 foot in front of you, and you're going for a rouge, and you know there's 30 cars in front of you somewhere in that mist. And if you think if someone crashes now, like, you're absolutely toast. So, yeah, a bit of scared. I'm probably a bit scared then, for sure.
Okay. Do you have a favorite racing memory?
Yeah, London last year.
Yeah.
Favorite racing? Yeah, I mean, obviously winning the World Championship was pretty special. I think the first time I drove drove an F1 car with the McLaren Autosport Award, that was a pretty special memory. It was with Silverstone and the McLaren, pretty amazing memory. And I probably put that one as, if I'm not choosing a win, which is obviously a big thing for any racing driver, as just a memory, like a test day, it was probably that McLaren F1 test.
See, one win that stands out to me, well, for me anyway, was the second win in London.
Okay,
The end of season 8. It was like right at the end of Gen 2.
Yeah.
And that's because I was the circuit announcer for that weekend. So I got to commentate on one of your race wins,
that's cool.
which is quite nice for me.
Yeah, that was good. That was a good race win. That was a good weekend for me, actually. It was a grand slam.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I say you won. You dominated that one. Fantastic. I do wonder, the London E-Prix, because they've got like the music going on in the indoor section and all sorts of that. Can you hear that inside the car?
Yeah.
When you're driving? So is it distracting at all?
I think you zone out of it pretty quickly. But when you're on the grid, and the DJ's going, you've got Tiny Temper performing and stuff like that, and then literally 30 seconds later you're driving out into turn 1, because obviously you have no formation lap in Formula E. That's pretty nuts. Whereas in Formula 1 or junior categories, you've got all this build-up, and then you've got like a sort of 2 minutes to gather your thoughts and focus on what's going ahead, whereas in Formula E, you don't have that.
Okay. I have 2 more questions for you. Who is the best teammate you've ever had?
The best teammate I've ever had? Felix Rosenqvist. Just because he's super fast, and he taught me a lot, and the way he approaches a race weekend and wasn't so serious, and taught me a little bit about to enjoy the lifestyle we're living in. Not be so hard on myself if it doesn't go so well.
What was that? Is that in Formula 3?
Yeah, 2015. Well,
Prague. And lastly, what is the best advice you've ever received?
Probably from Felix when he was, because I used to be like so data driven and very like numbers, and after every session I'd want to look up my driving and compare against other drivers and all this, and he didn't like exactly sit me down and say, look, do this, but he was just, the way he did it was just like very relaxed. He said if he wanted to look at a bit of data he would, but he generally just drove a lot more of instinct, and I appreciated how much he enjoyed his racing, because he wasn't even in a great spot at that point. He'd done F3 for like 3 years and his career wasn't really going anywhere at that stage, and I just appreciated how much he was still enjoying it. So yeah, probably from Felix, and just taught me a lot. And now I'm very much like just drive off instinct. I never really look at any data. I absolutely love my day job, and like, as I said earlier, I don't let the bad days affect me anywhere near as much as they used to.
Well, Jake, it's been so great getting your insights. Thank you so much for joining us, and we wish you just all the best for the rest of this season. Good luck.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me on.
All right, no worries. And listeners, don't forget, we've got the races coming thick and fast. So make sure that we're on your RSS feed. Get subscribed to Missed Apex Formula E. So we've got the race reviews coming on the day of the races, so they'll be ready the day after. And we've got more interviews like this coming in the not too distant future. And a reminder, get the merch, Wrong But First hoodies, and much, much more available on our merch site. Check the link, it'll be down in the show notes. So until next time, check us out at Formula E Pod on X as well. Myself at Chris on Racing on X, Instagram, TikTok, Threads. Remember Threads, that's a thing. So check us out there. We'll see you next time. This was Missed Apex Formula E.